Well, team, the ride never ends. 1105 is about a month away, and it's bringing almost full-blown rework. So, druids, paladins, hunters, shamans, you guys are all seeing real big changes, but that's actually only the beginning. There's plenty else as well, including something really bizarre to start off with. In a way, we've got a bit of a best-in-slot race, so warriors, hunters, warlocks, mages, priests, and rogues get to be Drakthir, which is pretty cool, but Drakthir have got Glide, which is nice, but has a little bit of an unintended perk with it. So the little speed boost that you get from the double jump is actually quite good. Now, Blizzard caught the worst of this. They nerfed it, so for non-evokers, it was almost a 50% speed boost. Now, though, it's closer to 20%. Still, if you want to just hit your spacebar a hell of a lot, you can, technically get where you're going a bit quicker in one of those. Anyway, let's get into the proper changes, starting with Paladins. Paladins, we've got an almost complete rework, and it's all to accomplish a few goals. The good news is they basically have succeeded in accomplishing them. So here's what's up. Goal number 1 is to make picking our Abundance of Utility easier, and they've done that by moving some things around, like, say, Divine Toll, that just makes the tree easier to navigate. The second goal is to turn us into off-healers a little more, and that means we get the likes of Selfless Healer, Lightbearer, and Righteous Protection, so that's pretty sweet. Third is a little bit of support, like with Lead the Charge. Fourth is to remove loads of throughput talents, because, yeah, those should be in the spec trees. And fifth is to update a whole bunch of minor little annoyances, like Hammer of Justice's varying cooldown reductions. Basically, it's all worked. It's extremely welcome, and now that we've got a series of brilliant spec trees, and now a great class tree, I mean, Paladins are just kings. We're on the top. We can do everything. And that means that Paladins are, in fact, the Squarespace of classes, who are awesome because they let you go from idea to done fast. They're Squarespace. Now, when I needed a job site and a game landing page, I went to them because they make getting the job done simple, fast, cross-device, and looking fantastic. Their award-winning templates get you started with a strong foundation, and then Blueprint even guides you through building your own template. The block-based editor makes crafting your site down to the details so simple so that you can focus on the design and the content, actually getting your story across. And if you want even more control, Fluid Engine lets you do just that. Everyone, I think, should have a killer site that represents them, because a good first impression helps you with jobs, or even just hosting your portfolio or your side hustle. And if you do have a side hustle, the good news is they've got you covered. That's because their e-commerce features let you deliver your digital products or even your physical ones. And if it's physical, they'll even hook up with your shipping provider. They also support courses if you want to sell your knowledge, bookings, be they online or in person. So if you're doing photography or a yoga studio, you can do that. And they've got the features to help your business succeed. And most importantly, an all-in-one package that makes it easy so you can focus on what matters. You can go to squarespace.com/Bellular Gaming to build your site today with a free trial, and then you can send it live with 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain with code Bellular Gaming. Balance sees large changes, and that really matters. That's because it's the range spec of WoW's second most popular class, right? And in our War Within roundup, it was a loser for good reason. It really is a pretty screwy spec right now, so let's see if they've changed things. On the top, Circle of Life and Death is back, Starfall is baseline, and you can now have a Celestial alignment with 2 charges, with a charge refreshing every minute, which is pretty good. But, of course, the question is, does it actually solve the major problem? So, rather than just turn into a patch note text-to-speech creature, I'm going to go through balance issue by issue to see if the problems players face have actually been solved. First up, baselining Starfall should help the lack of hybrid talent builds, because right now, if you want to maximize your single target damage, you basically sacrifice every drop of AoE, which sucks, especially in raid or say doing tyrannical keys. Then, the damage profile. Not a massive amount of change, but it is helped by the 2 charged Celestial alignment that you can go for. Next, and probably the largest for me, is the low skill ceiling. Obviously here tuning will matter, so if tuning hits the mark, then Circle of Life and Death's return theoretically should bring Stellar Flare back into the rotation, which will give you a bit more to do. Now, obviously, multi-dot plate spinning is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but Blizzard explicitly say they're trying to not let that style get too much stronger. So we'll see. Now, there are other additions like Crashing Star and Hail the Stars that add a little bit more just talent synergy, but nothing that you can directly impact in a great sense. Then there's Wild Mushroom. It's odd, effectively a useless spell unless you happen to love the fantasy, and another button on a spec that already has got loads of buttons and loads of problems. So now you can go for a passive version that procs with Sunfire damage, which you can do, but it is still very weak. The next thing they've done then is move power away from Wrath and Starfire and basically over to other spells. Now, ideally, right, if they actually hit their goals here, then your basic bread and butter sort of filler abilities, those will be less of your overall damage, which should mean the rest of your kit shines a bit more, which should mean that if you use the rest of your kit better, i.e., you know, you're really skilled, then you should shine a bit more. So that could be good for the skill ceiling, but again, it will all depend on tuning. The last two big annoyances for Boomkins then are defensives and movement, because you are really squishy and you're a hard caster, which is a fun combo. There are no new healing or defensives to counter those problems, but there's a little bit more movement from some synergies with some free spenders, but yeah, that's basically all. To wrap things up then, their struggle with 2-point talents has been reduced a little bit, as has the lack of crit scaling, but this is really the equivalent overall, right, of having a moldy wall and just painting over it. Like, yes, you don't notice the mold as much, but the real problem still exists. And I think here the real problem is the core design is just stuck in the past, right? It hasn't really changed. I think the Eclipse system is needlessly restrictive. Being inside an Eclipse doesn't feel like a bonus or exciting. It's just a necessary baseline that's a maintenance buff. And it's one of the last ones in the game. Every other class kind of decided they sucked. I mean, even in this very patch, Rogue gets their Slice and Dice change to activate automatically. And while Rogues get to enjoy that, Boomkins are still here hardcasting 2 Starfires every 15 seconds, which I don't think they'll love. Combine that then with having to apply and reapply dots manually, which neither Affliction or Shadow have got to do as much now, and you just have a spec that feels dated. And that means then that with this patch, Boomies do have more going for them. It is positive change, but big picture, honestly, I think they just need a rework. A version where maybe Eclipse has less friction, feels like less of a hindrance, feels like more of a bonus or an opportunity rather than a hard requirement. Something proper. 1105 is a nice painkiller if you're playing Boomkin already and that's what you love, but for anybody else, I think Boomkin is still hard to recommend. Rogues, okay, you guys are a little bit like the Boomies, just crying out for fixes. And I've actually got good news for you. There's a few changes here, not as many as people would like, but it is a really good start. So, cut to the chase, now activate Slice and Dice instead of just extending it. And that means that, well, Slice and Dice is basically just a passive, but it's one that you can press a bit earlier if you really need it. So that's good. Then Thistle Tea now automatically activates whenever your energy drops below 30, which, you know, it won't really have an impact for people who have mastered its usage, but if you're a newer rogue, then yeah, that'll be good for the skill floor. Echoing Reprimand then has been redesigned and it's been weaved into some new talents. One of them, as an example, is Supercharger. I'll explain it this way. Your main damage buffs, so Symbol, Shiv, or Roll the Bones, those supercharge combo points just like Reprimand did. But now the actual Echoing Reprimand is a passive that does bonus damage whenever you successfully use a supercharged combo point. And if you want to lean into it a little bit more, there's a choice node that buffs the supercharged effect. The overall impact here is smoothness though, and I think that is a good thing. Essentially, it's you having less buttons, and in a class like Rogue, that can basically be a launch sequence to get started. I think that is a positive. On top of that then, Subterfuge now explicitly states that it extends any combat bonuses from Stealth, which is quite welcome, and another odd one is that Shadow Step is gone for Outlaw, but they now have got a second charge of Grappling Hook. Honestly, in terms of theme, I think that is just abundantly sensible, like it just fits it better. Anyway, there are individual changes to specs that are quite nice. As an example, Assassinations in Venom has its damage bonus stacked twice. Outlaw gets Blade Flurry restored to its old Acrobatic Strikes range, which I think people will love for AoE, and rather massively, Crackshot now refreshes between the eyes when gaining Stealth. Over with Subtlety then, it loses Sepsis and Shadow Dust, but it does gain multiple charges of Symbols of Death. Plus, with Reprimand and Sepsis gone, Flagellation has been dropped to a 1-minute cooldown. And perhaps the best news is that the Trickster's Coup de Grace no longer locks you out of off GCDs. That is big for playability. So overall, right, this is a great set of changes. And each rogue spec does have some genuinely excellent gameplay just buried under a mountain of pain points. Before 1105, that was a pretty big mountain. Now it's a smaller mountain. As time goes on, let's hope more of those pain points go away and the good that exists within Rogue can just shine more and more. Hunters, you guys get treated to decent changes in all 3 specs, on top of a full Dark Ranger rework as well. For Marksmanship and BM, Black Arrow now replaces Killshot, and it's all about that execute window and the Killshot procs, which are now called Death Blows. There's then a bunch of more exciting passives like an automatic Murder of Crows, and of course, new Banshee Wings on your Withering Fire. So yeah, if you're MM or BM, I think you'll be very happy with what's went on with the Dark Ranger hero talent. Anyway, for the other things, Beast Mastery has got a new emphasis on Cobra Shot, and even a chance for auto attacks to shoot off a Cobra Shot and have a stacking damage buff that resets after 6 stacks. That's not in isolation though, because Barb Shot has now got a cooldown increase, but also a duration increase. However, the new Cobra can reduce that back down. So, interesting little dynamic. Moving on to marksmanship then, there's the big issue finally being solved, instead of just a workaround, which is what they previously did with the launch of this expansion. Precise Shots is now Precise Shot. So you only tap 1 arcane shot after an aim shot instead of 2. That's big. Then another welcome change is the haste buff from steady shots now comes from 1 steady shot instead of doing 2. So that's really nice, and it means you're much more free to just, do your aim shots and your rapid fires, which is the part of that spec that actually feels good. Okay, survival then. You guys are going to have Butchery and Fury of the Eagle improvements, where Fury can now generate tip stacks and it gives haste while only being 3 seconds. Then Butchery is actually losing its charge system. Instead, it's just going on a cooldown. It's losing the Mongoose Cleave, but instead it's getting a lot of extra damage. So yeah, it's different, but when you hit it, you will basically shred stuff. All of these things then, I think, are solid iterations on specs that already had pretty solid design iterations. What we're kind of seeing is not a full rework, it's more of a slow brick-by-brick rework that, at least for the Hunter, is actually working out quite well. Mages then. Blizzard just love to tinker with you guys, so here's what's happened. Fire's Majesty of the Phoenix now stacks to make 1 Flamestrike Massive instead of making multiple shorter casts, and an issue with Scorch's proc has been fixed. We then got arcane changes where Blizzard have, again, done some fiddling to get nether precision to work. So now, right, whenever you consume it, it will buff Arcane Barrage, stacking twice to restore 4 charges, which creates a pretty nice little loop of using nethers and then firing off a barrage, so that should feel good. And the fun thing is it's kind of close to the recently fixed and unintended gameplay that, was a bug that players actually enjoyed. So that should be quite positive. Late Drinker then doesn't work with Barrage anymore, and it's now applied with Touch of the Magi. Then there's also some changes to the hero talents, but it's nothing major, except Splinter Storm no longer generating Winter's Chill. Overall then, Mage was a real strong starter with this expansion. You can tell they're getting closer to kind of the perfect mage. It's still getting regular changes, but as time goes on, we see those changes be smaller and more precise, and that means that it's kind of toe-in-toe with Paladin, I think anyway, for being the best class in World of Warcraft right now. Shamans, even more changes for you guys. So, Elemental's tree is shaken up, Ascendance is reworked, and by the way, you can now have the big hair version of the new Ascendance or the not big hair version of the new Ascendance, depending what you like. I actually think they're particularly, awesome. So, you got that, but you've lost Skybreaker's Fiery Demise. There are then a few new talents that upgrade the Lightning build, and then one that adds a nice Flame Shock interaction. So, with Ascendance, right, the rework basically removes everything it changed, right? It does that, and instead what it does is it adds a ton of overload damage and proc chance. Stormkeeper is now basically a must-get in the tree, and a bunch of frustrations around elemental spawns have been fixed up. And it's similar with Ice Fury as well. It procs from more than just Lava Burst, but it's only 1 empowered Frost Shock, which now hits an AoE, which I suppose is a bit of an ouch in the movement front, because if you had multiple charges of that, well, you could still DPS in the move. Now, unfortunately, the baseline reduction of Lightning Bolt's cast time is actually gone, and elemental duration is down 50% as well, which is basically them removing damage from some places, and I think that's because they're, just jazzed about the Ascendance forms. I think they want to put more of your damage focus in those, and that probably is what motivates that change. Over in Enhancement then, you guys get a new ability proc called Voltaic Blaze. Basically, your lightning spells can turn your next Flame Shock into a really big AoE blast of blazing thunder, which is pretty cool fantasy. It's also then had a ton of tinkering. Some of that is good, some of it is less good. So there's a new version of Feral Spirits. It is a nice option. Doom Winds is now actually a whirlwind of damage around you, which kind of fits the spell fantasy better, and Ice Strike has got a new optional version that replaces Frost Shock with a proc, just like Ice Fury, and yeah, finally, an awesome talent that buffs Crash Lightning in single target. And I gotta say, Crash Lightning, I mean, come on, it's just an awesome spell. Anyway, there are some range nerfs that are a little bit frustrating though, so that is a loss. Over on the hero talent front then, Totemic got a few things. So the 3 elementals buffs now guarantee Hot Hands procs, which is quite nice. They give Flame Shock an AoE effect, and they buff your next lightning spell. Plus, Hot-Handed Lava Lashes now throw out Sunderings. So mechanically a lot of wins, but, more than anything, I think the best bit here is the general UX update. Like, man, the look and the feel of playing enhancement is just stellar. Absolutely one of the standouts in World of Warcraft. It feels awesome, it feels on theme, and they're nailing the fantasy. Healers then, who've got the last few changes that I think are worth talking about. Resto Druid and Shaman have both got new talents. Shaman has a mana cost reduction to Chain Heal that also buffs the Riptide application, and Druids have got a bunch too. 2 Nature Swiftness charges, a buff to Abundance and Cenarian Ward, Swift Men cooldown reduction, and automatic nourishes after your free regrowths. All pretty good. For Mistweaver then, you also get some good stuff. Ancient Teachings, the damage transfer passive, is now baseline and includes Crackling Jade Lightning, but it is substantially nerfed, so that's a little bit of a bad, but the new Jadefire Teachings talent returns to its old strength when it's basically procced by either Stomp or Thunder Focus T. So essentially it's a minor change that allows some DPS to heal transfer even when you're not fully spec'd to do that. If you don't want that though, you can just take Rushing Wind Kick, which is a replacement to Rising Sun Kick that does AoE damage and also buffs Renewing Mist. So you've got that, and then a new talent that lets Thunder Focus T turn your lightning into a massive AoE nuke, which also will do some healing. Okay, let's talk about the verdict then. How well is Blizzard doing? What's the direction of travel? Overall, I'd say this. Rogue has still got a long way to go, but they are very positive changes. Balance, honestly, just needs a proper rework. They just need a schedule, that simple as. Paladins and Mages are still the favorite children. You literally cannot go wrong if you decide to go and play one. Shamans are getting a ton of love. It's clear Blizzard wants to get them right. And Demon Hunters. Blizzard forgot about them again, which I assume means that 11.0.7 will have something for them. So overall, this is not perfect, but the direction of travel absolutely is positive, and these are not in a vacuum. That's because the hero talent changes are also big, and if you want the full breakdown of what's coming on that front, you can check out this video next.